Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Character Analysis. It's been a while, but definitely want to keep this brand new series going. I learned a few things from last time I did it. I just feel like I could say a few things better, and just in general, overall, smooth over. So today we're going to be analyzing the character Ellie. So as you can see here, this is Ellie in the brand new Last of Us. The remastered or the remake, which is good. So. We're kind of on a Last of Us track right here. I streamed The Last of Us. I've been talking about it on podcasts. We've been doing Last of Us character analysis. So we're kind of on a Last of Us spree here. And I'll explain that at the end of the video about a few things, but having to do with our Last of Us thing. But yeah, let's talk about Ellie. So Ellie Williams, I believe that's her last name as it says. I'm getting this from the Last of Us wiki. Ellie Williams is the central character of the Last of Us series. She serves as the main character in The Last of Us American Dreams. I believe that's a comic book. Don't quote me on that. I think that's a comic book or some other kind of series. She's also the player protagonist in The Last of Us Part 1, and the playable protagonist of both Last of Us Left Behind and Last of Us Part 2. The game player seeing her is Last of Us Left Behind, just to, just see Ellie. Ellie grew up as an orphan in the Boston quarantine zone and attended a military preparatory school where she met and befriended Riley Abel. Um, when Ellie was 14, the pair were both infected with the cordyceps brain infection, where Ellie discovered she was immune. A friend of her mother's and the leader of the Fireflies, Marlene, believes he was the key to reverse engineering a vaccine. Marlene tasked Joel Miller, a smuggler, with escorting Ellie outside of the QZ. The simple drop-off turned into a year-long journey across America, and the two eventually formed a close bond. Now, we're talking about Ellie here. We already talked about Joel's relationship with Ellie and everything in the first game, but we're going to be strictly talking about Ellie. Not really mentioning Joel because obviously we already did his character analysis. Just really talking about Ellie. So, a few things about Ellie. We just talked about she grew up as an orphan in the quarantine zone, and she obviously is a very key part of the whole Last of Us story. She got bit. She is immune, and like I said, Marlene is she could be the key to curing mankind. Now, as you all know, there's spoilers pretty much in most of these character analysis for The Last of Us. There are spoilers ahead, so yeah, so there will be spoilers. Now, let's talk about more here. Upon reaching the Fireflies in Salt Lake City, Joel learned that the only killing Ellie could create the cure. Refusing to allow this, he killed the head surgeon, which is very important. We'll talk about that later in the character analysis. And escaped with Ellie to settle down in Jackson, his brother's community in Wyoming, for the next 4 years. Ellie came to resent Joel for saving her life. In 2038, Abby Anderson, former Firefly and the surgeon's daughter, found and killed Joel. Ellie vowed her revenge and pursued Abby to Seattle. Her efforts were fruitless, leading her to retire on a farm with her girlfriend Dina and her son, JJ. Unable to forgive Abby, Ellie abandoned her family and pursued her once again to Santa Barbara, only to spare Abby in the end. She returned to Jackson once more, coming to terms with Joel's death and his decision to save her life. Now, there's very important lore here, and we're going to be talking about Abby too further down. We're going to be doing an Abby character analysis because she's one of the main characters of Last of Us Part 2 here. But, in Part 1, we just talked about that, what happened in Part 1. Joel really ended up loving her in the end. It's a very strong bond, and he wasn't going to let her die because that was the only way to make a cure. But he wasn't going to let that happen. And eventually, an important scene played out in The Last of Us Part 2 during those flashbacks. Ellie went back to the hospital in Salt Lake City, and she found a tape, and it was Marlene, and basically Marlene just ended up saying that there is nobody. Because, what Joel said at the end of the first game, Joel said, there's dozens like her, and they stopped looking for a cure, basically. There's no way that there's going to be a cure made. And yeah, basically lied to Ellie, and she went back to the hospital in Salt Lake City and found a tape, and Marlene basically just ended up saying that there's nobody else, there's nobody else that's like her. She's the only one that's the cure, and she's the only one that's immune. And she ran away from Jackson, and during that time, so she was outside the hospital. Joel rode up on a horse, and yeah, he was he was worried. I mean, she ran off in the middle of the night, and left Jackson to go to the hospital, and Ellie was mad at Joel, and rightfully so. But Ellie, Joel ended up telling her the truth, not lying to her anymore, and she ended up going back to Jackson, but she wasn't able to forgive Joel. Uh, and actually, as you'll see here, they had an argument the night before his death, and she grew to resent him, and he ended up dying, and obviously, she went to Seattle. She tried to revenge Abby, but she couldn't bring herself to do it because what ended up happening in the part two, once again, spoilers, it would just be an endless loop. It would be revenge because Lev with Abby, that's Abby met Lev in um, one of the chapters of part two. If Ellie killed Lev, or if Ellie killed Abby, then Lev would basically just want to go after Ellie, and it would be the same loop. It wouldn't, it would never end. It's the revenge cycle or something like that. I believe that was the whole meaning of the end of part two. Now I know a lot of Last of Us fans, including me, when I first played Last of Us Part Two, including me, I was so upset when she didn't kill Abby, and I still am very upset. But the ending, it was good, but I wish she had killed Abby. So Ellie ends up going back on the farm, and Dina ends up leaving her. And we're also going to do a Dina character analysis because she is also an important character in the Last of Us part two. So let's go back to her past. Ellie Williams was born in the spring of 2019. By the time the cordyceps brain infection had spread throughout the United States, her mother was a nurse named Anna, although the identity of her father is unknown. On the day of her birth, her mother passed away. Before her death, Anna entrusted her closest friend Marlene to look after Ellie. However, Ellie did not meet Marlene until she was 13 years old. According to Ellie, at one point in her life, she drove a car and used a BB rifle to shoot at rats. Um, Shortly after turning 13, Ellie arrives in the Boston quarantine zone on a bus to cite the military scanning of a man for infection. She thinks nothing of it until the scan reads positive, and a man is forced to his knees at gunpoint. This sight frightens her. Now, I believe this is all taking place in the comics, but I'm still going to talk about it. Once she is safely inside the gate, she and the other survivors leave the bus. She is approached by a soldier who knows her. He warns her not to pull any of her old stunts once she had settled in and tells her that he can no longer look after her. Ellie asks that he take her with him, but he refuses, citing his responsibility to his own family. Um, just takes place in the comics. So yeah, so Ellie, grew up a very rough life, and even the year journey across the world with Joel, it they grew a bond together, and it was a love hate relationship at first, but and left behind here, this scenario right here is Joel fell. They were at the university looking for the Fireflies, and David's people ended up attacking them at the university, and Joel fell on a rebar and got really injured. And in this scenario right here in the gameplay, she took him to this mall in Colorado, and she's trying to find she tries to find a stuff to stitch him up. She does. She's really brave. I mean, personally, I'd be really scared if I was in her position, but she's brave. She ended up stitching him up. She ended up getting some medicine, and Joel ended up surviving that injury, and they ended up moving on together, and so on and so forth. But yeah, Ellie is a very brave girl in the first one, young girl in the first one, and you know it's she's also very important to the story. And what I think, and this is coming from me now, if there were to be a Last of Us Part One or Part Three, then I think Ellie would, because when she came back, Dina was gone because Dina actually was mad at her for leaving. So, um, to go find Abby again. But I think what would happen in Last of Us Part Three, Ellie would continue. Um, I feel like it would be JJ, which is their son. They're growing a son together. I think JJ would be all grown up, and Ellie would, I feel like they would, it'd be something to do with JJ. I don't know. He would just be all grown up and kind of be in the same kind of situation as Ellie, and I feel like it could be new adventures, and he could probably be playable. No, that's if there were a part three. Um, that's my speculation, but or that would be really cool if that's how it would work. He could play as JJ and kind of do his journey, and you could see Ellie and Dina old, and could also see how actually if they ever make up, if they ever Dina isn't mad at Ellie, like the end of the second game. So I don't know. That was just a cool part three scenario. And a very interesting thing, and no, nowadays a lot of other games do this, but I feel like in Left Behind, her best friend Riley, the beginning of the game, Riley comes to wake her up, and they go to the mall. They have a fun time at the mall, and but Riley ends up being a firefly, and she passed initiation and everything with Marlene, and but Ellie, it's the Fireflies in the military, and the QZ, they're very, Ellie's kind of with the military and Riley's with the Fireflies, and there's a rivalry going on. So, but they can't really, Marlene doesn't want Riley to go see Ellie, and Ellie saw she see if she could become a Firefly, but she couldn't, because she just wanted to stay in the school. Marlene wanted Ellie to stay in the school to be, stay safe and everything. So, what ends up happening? The mall, they turn on all the mall lights and the electric, and they have a fun time. And then Riley, they start dancing on the table, and all this. Then they end up kissing, which I think was very interesting. Ellie, Ellie was gay, so and I think that's really interesting to games. It's kind of switches up a bit. I understand, equality and all that stuff. So, but what happens is Riley ends up kind of quitting her Firefly. They just want to do what they want to do. They want to run away and just be together, Ellie and Riley. So Riley ends up throwing her pennant off, her dog tag, for Firefly, and they end up kissing, which, is a very important part, not only for The Last of Us, but just The Last of Us fan base. And I know people were mad, the backlash, people were not happy about that, and whatever. That's just whatever. But yeah, very important character development for Ellie in that moment. I'm glad we got to see that in Left Behind, and they end up kissing. Then the mall gets attacked by infected, and obviously I said they both get bit. Riley dies first, but Ellie obviously stays immune, and yeah, then it eventually gets revealed to Dina that Ellie is infected, um, is immune too. So then yeah, that's just how Ellie is. The ending of Ellie, her status is alive at the end of part two. And one more thing, what's very important is in the fight with Abby, Ellie actually, I think her hand got bit off, or her finger. A few of her fingers, I think two or just one of her finger, um, got cut off or something like that. I forget what happened, but her fingers get cut off, and it shows. It's a very beautiful thing that it shows that revenge is not all, because Joel taught her how to play the guitar, and Joel, had a song for her, I know, in part two. And when she got back, she tried to play the guitar, but she couldn't because she didn't have fingers, the right fingers to strum the guitar, and she couldn't play Joel's song right, and she will never be able to play Joel's song right. And it just shows it's a beautiful thing that shows revenge is not everything, and um, she can't, she won't be able to remember Joel, and his song and how she taught him to play guitar because of what she did, because she wanted revenge for Joel, and it ultimately ended up costing her one of the memories, of Joel. And yeah, I think that's really beautiful thing they did. But yeah, that's Ellie. Her current status is alive, and yeah, that's everything. So everything you need about know about Ellie Williams. Now there's tons of other stuff, little details that I left out, but that's just pretty much the main, character analysis of Ellie, the story, the backstory, what she did, and everything. So what here's brings me to the end. What I was gonna say is we are on the Last of Us spree. Like I said, we streamed it. We talk about it in podcasts. Now I think sometime next week I'll be making a podcast about the Last of Us game, part one, the remake, and I'll just be talking about that, and that'll kind of cap off our Last of Us escapades. We'll obviously still have finish up Last of Us character analysis, but as far as talking about the brand new game, I'll be talking about that in a podcast next week, because I did, you know, finish it and everything. So yeah, I'll be talking about that, giving my final thoughts on the Last of Us remake and what I really thought of it and everything. But yeah, we'll continue with character analysis. The next one I'm probably gonna do Bill, Bill from part one. We'll talk about Bill and because just I feel like he was also a very important character. He showed up in one chapter, so I feel like he was a very important character too. So we'll be talking about him next episode. But hopefully, you guys are enjoying the series. Kind of wanted to, we'll be posted the last one about Joel 2 weeks ago, I think, a few weeks ago. So we'll start this one back up. I'm kind of wanted to keep this new series going, But yeah, make sure to subscribe for more content, like the video, all that good stuff. Discord, Twitch, Instagram, links in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video.